what it stands for Hypertext Markup Language. I know, not a super descriptive description. What's markup? What does it mean to be a markup language? And for now, we'll just understand that this is the standard markup language used to create web pages. And an important point to make is that pretty much any web page you see out there, it has HTML to represent sort of the skeleton of the page. You can kind of think of it as a skeleton. So it's kind of the foundation upon which, say, the styling and the user interactivity is made. You can't have either of those things without HTML. In other words, HTML basically tells your browser how to display web pages. So browser being something like Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Safari, Internet Explorer, or Edge. There's all kinds of different browsers out there. And they all share the same fact that they take HTML. They figure out what do these HTML tags, what are all these elements in here, what does this want me to represent this page as? So essentially it interprets the markup and it represents that in your browser as a web page. Now back to this markup thing, what exactly is a markup language? You just really need to know that it's a language designed for processing the presentation of the text. So you mark up your text with certain things we're going to call tags, and then the browser kind of interprets those tags and changes how it's displaying something. Think of it as taking some kind of document, marking it up with a pen. In our case, the browser won't show the pen markings. It'll show, say, if you wanted to highlight a piece, it's going to show that as highlighted, for example. So I think this will make sense once you actually see what HTML looks like. So what does HTML look like? And maybe you've seen it before, maybe not. You might have seen it if, for example, you go to a page and you accidentally right-clicked and hit View Page Source. And you say, oh, geez, what's all this stuff? Well, this is, for the most part, HTML. This is all HTML. This is styling stuff. That's not HTML, but down here it continues on. This is all HTML. And you can kind of see that it's marked up in certain ways. We have this thing called a div, this thing called an h1, for example, and that's what HTML looks like. So it uses, I'll put an HTML here, HTML uses tags and elements to enclose different parts of the content. So what that's going to look like is, say you wanted to represent some text, and you wanted that text to be, a paragraph of its own. What would that look like? Well, we would use this thing called a p tag. So here's what a tag looks like. You open it up with this kind of angled bracket. I'll put it on the line below. You put in your tag name. In our case, it's going to be p for paragraph. And then you put whatever text you want in here. So I'm going to put my name is Chris in here. And then important thing to remember, for most of these tags, you do have to put a closing tag. So this text is kind of sandwiched between a closing p tag that looks like this. Notice it looks pretty similar, except there's a slash in front of it. So everything here is contained within this p tag. This entire thing makes an HTML element, which means in our markup, if we did another p tag after this, like so, p, what's your name, for example, and then I remember to close it off. These are two separate elements. So this is one element, this is another element, and because these are in separate paragraph tags, they're not going to sit next to each other on the page. So this is one paragraph, and this denotes another paragraph. So once you kind of see it like that, it starts to make sense when we say it's a markup language. We're marking up what kind of looks like regular text, but we're marking it up with these tags to make them into elements. And then the browser will interpret that and represent it in a way that you are used to on a web page. So I'd say once you kind of get the hang of marking up your code in HTML, it does become pretty simple. There is a bit of a learning curve though. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to paste in just kind of some boilerplate HTML code that you'll see on pretty much any site. So here we go. Let's explore what some of these things are before we start writing some more HTML of our own. So you notice that pretty much I'm going to paste in just kind of some boilerplate HTML code that you'll see on pretty much any site. So here we go. Let's explore what some of these things are before we start writing some more HTML of our own. So you notice that pretty much any page you'll visit, if you do like what I did over here, you can always right-click. You can view the source of any page you go to. Here I'm just on example.com. You can always view the source, and you'll notice that every page always has certain elements. For example, every page needs to have this doctype HTML tag. Everyone needs to start with an HTML tag, needs a head, then it has a bunch of stuff below that in a body, and then it closes those tags off at the end over there. So what we'll do is we'll kind of explore each of these, and I'll add a little comment here afterwards, just with the pound sign, to denote what these things are. So what I'm writing here, it's not markup, just consider these as kind of extra comments after each of these, and then we'll write some HTML later on in this kind of style. So what this doctype HTML does is basically it informs the browser that the document type is HTML. This is required because, back in the bad old days of the internet, there were different doc types that you could use. These days, really, you only really see doctype HTML, so you can just think of this as a historical artifact, really. Just know that your page needs this in order to render it out as HTML. That's all we really need to know about that, and you'll always notice this at the top of the page. So, for example, just to bring it up again, we'll see it on this page, doctype HTML. If we go to a different site, for example, here I am on google.ca, I can inspect or view the page source. In this code, it's kind of all compressed, but we don't need to worry about that. I just wanted to bring your attention to this fact that we have doctype HTML up at the very top. Right, and I can kind of zoom in so you can see that a bit better. Doctype HTML up at the top. So it's just something that every page has and is required. Again, just to indicate to the browser to render it out as HTML. Next, we have this HTML piece. HTML will basically wrap all the content. So it wraps all content on the page. Notice, just like with this P tag, our HTML, we open it, we have all of the content of our page, and then we close it. So that's what this HTML tag does. It just kind of wraps everything up in an HTML element. Again, this is just another thing that's required to get it to render out properly on the browser. And again, to bring our attention back to example.com, let's view the page source. Does this open with HTML? Yep, it sure does. It has some stuff, and then it closes at the very bottom. Notice that the order is important. So if this were closed off too early, say we open it here, then we close HTML immediately, here's ampersands. Well, here's the content you need to get started writing some simple HTML. We need to have some idea of what markup language is. We need to have some concept of elements and tags. And once we have an understanding of that, it makes it easier to kind of start learning how to write some HTML.